Hello there. In today's video I'm going to show you how to grow white cedar trees from seed. To begin with, we need to collect some seeds. I'm going to be picking these from a hedgerow in a farmer's field. If this isn't an option, cedar trees can be commonly found in swamps and by small creeks. White cedars can be easily identified by their needles, which take the shape of flat fans, or else by their cones. They produce a great quantity of very small cones, about 1/8 of an inch. White cedar is a fairly common tree in eastern Canada. Farmers use them for hedgerows because the broad, flat needles, coupled with the density of the trees, makes for a very effective windbreak. The trees are also quite hardy. The wood is slightly rot-resistant and is commonly used for fences and decking. The Latin name is Arbor Vitae, tree of life. The story goes that it got this name because medicine made from the needles was used to treat the scurvy of Jacques Cartier and his sailors. The seeds begin to ripen in mid to late September, but the tree is fairly generous and you can collect them right through winter, though there will be less and less per cone. It's useful to go out collecting when there's snow on the ground. You can look at the ground and see the seeds that have blown from the trees, and this will tell you if you're too late or not. The seeds are very small and orange, and if you don't know what you're looking for, they're quite difficult to spot. If you can see some seeds on the snow, that means that there's probably still some seeds in the adjacent tree. To pick them, you just walk up to the tree, grab a cluster of them, pull them off, and stick them in a bag. The old Indian way of planting these was to just cut off a whole branch with hundreds of cones and then shake it out over a prepared bed of ground. Basically just aiding seed dispersal. It's much more useful for me to grow them in pots, so that's what I'm going to do today. Besides which, I don't imagine my acquaintance would be too pleased with me cutting bits off of his trees. This way it'll only lose a couple of needles. Here we can see the little cones and some of the seeds that have fallen out of them. Each of these cones can contain up to 8 seeds, but it's early January, so they probably only got 2 or 3. If you're intending to plant more than a few of them, you should take from multiple trees so that you get a bit of genetic diversity. Grab a handful, move along, grab a handful, move along. Some people collect the cones in a bucket. I think they're small enough and I can pack them densely enough that I can just use a little bag. It doesn't take very much volume to get several hundred. It's also a lot more convenient than carrying around a bucket. It's a good sign for your collection efforts if picking the cones leaves a mess of little seeds on the snow. Once the bag's adequately filled, we can pack up and head back. Inside now, we can take stock of our loot. I'm just going to dump it all into a big bowl for processing. A bucket would probably be better for this, but all my buckets are frozen solid. Now I'm going to separate the seeds from the cones just by tossing it in the bowl like popcorn. You can see some of the seeds are flying out onto the table. This is why a bucket is better, higher wall to keep them all in. Oh well, I can just sweep them up. After a while, many of the seeds will have shaken loose from the cones and settled to the bottom, while the larger cones rose to the top. At this point, I can begin transferring the cones to another bowl, skimming them off the top, sifting them through my fingers. Just like panning for gold. Eventually, I'll have got all the cones out, and there'll be nothing left but seeds and some debris. I want to put these aside so that I can do a little bit more sifting. I'm going to repeat the tossing a second time just to make sure that I've got most of the seeds. The law of diminishing returns strikes quickly, and I don't think there's a point in doing it 3 times. This little bowl's got something like 600 or 700 seeds in it, more than enough for what I'm planning. It doesn't hurt to scatter the cones someplace where you might like a tree, on the off chance there's still some seeds left inside. Most likely nothing will sprout, but like I said, it doesn't hurt. Now that we have the seeds, it's time to prepare a tray to plant them in. It's better to plant them in an open tray rather than in cells like this, but for the sake of the experiment, I want to be able to keep track of them easily. Any old dirt will do for the tray, but you'll have best results if you use some of that fancy store-bought dirt. That stuff's loaded with nutrients, you just can't compete with that stuff. In an open tray, you can just sort of scatter them fairly densely over the whole surface. Here I'm going to put one little pinch in every cell. The seeds don't have a great survival rate, so you want to have a few extras. Once they're all placed, I'm going to fairly thoroughly saturate the soil. The seeds are too small to bury themselves in the wild, so they're designed to grow on the surface of mossy ground. Here the water pressure will make sure that they have good contact. Once I'm finished watering them, I place them in the windowsill and cover them over with a clear plastic cover. The cover acts as a little greenhouse, trapping moisture and keeping some of the heat in, making the seeds more likely to germinate. If you're planting them in an irregular-sized container, you can cover them over with cling film and it will do the job. You're going to want to check on them every day. If there's condensation on the inside of the lid, that means there's adequate water. If not, you want to add more. If, like me, you're starting them in winter, you want to be sure to put them in one of your warmer rooms. If it's too cold, they'll be slow to germinate. White cedar is a fairly easy tree to start with. The seed collection window is very long, so you don't need to plan ahead very much. Some other trees can be very complicated. You gotta store it in a bag for 3 months, and then you gotta store it in the fridge for 2 months, and then X, Y, and Z, and then X, Y, and Z. White cedars are very simple. Just keep it wet, hope for the best. 8 days have now passed, and some of the seeds are starting to germinate. We can see a root has sprouted from the seed in the bottom center of this cell. It's begun to bury itself into the soil and lift the seed up into the air. Now a second one has started just above it. It's a race. Who will win? I find it remarkable how quickly some of these things can grow. On the 13th and 14th day, there was a dramatic difference between the photo taken in morning versus afternoon. On the 14th day, they started to shed the seed coatings and open up their leaves. Once the bulk of them have started opening their leaves, that means it's time to take the cover off. The seeds want a lot more humidity than the seedlings, and you can kill them very quickly if you leave the cover on too long. I find it interesting how the baby leaves look nothing like the adult leaves. It'll be another couple of weeks before they start to develop the distinctive fans of flat needles, and then about a month after that before they need to be repotted. We're just going to leave them to it until then. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope it inspires you to give it a try. Thank you for watching.